welcome to this.
Hello.
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 And out there, hello to everyone. Welcome to this session on literary agents, what they can do for you and how do they work. I am very happy to have with me today speakers from all over the world, really. So we have Kelly, and I really want to thank her because she's in Tampa, Florida. So she had to get up very, very early. So thank you so much for joining us here and sacrificing your sleep.
Okay.
Yeah, in the US. Then we have Jaya Priya Vastuveda from India joining us in Bangalore. Hi, Jaya. Thanks for joining us. And we're also in Indonesia and Malaysia. So from Jakarta, we're being joined by Laxmi Pamunchak. Hi, Laxmi.
Hi.
Thanks for joining. And finally, wow, the only guy in this round, Jerome Usho from the PR State Agency from a very beautiful place in Malaysia. Hi, Jerome.
Hi there. Hi, Claudia.
So before we start, I would like to start with each of you telling us a little bit about your agency, what you do, and of course, Laxmi, not about your agency, but about how things are for you. Exactly. Maybe you are your own agent. And why you set up your agency. We'll start with a man. Jerome.
Sure. Yes. Well, thank you, Claudia. Thank you for having me, and it's nice to be with you. I work as a literary agent with the Astier Pécher Literary Agency. It's a Paris-based literary agency, which are Astier and Laure Pécher, both of whom had worked as publishers for many years in France. And I myself have joined the agency for about 4 years now. We represent a growing number of authors and publishers, most of them writing or publishing in French language, and part of the Francophone world. But we also represent several authors who write a variety of other languages. We deal both with fiction and non-fiction for adults. And we just recently also started dealing with children's literature and young adults literature with a new colleague of mine who is now in charge of that segment. And so myself, I have been based in Malaysia for the past 12 years or so now, and I personally of our Asian authors, as well as most of the agency's operation on the agent side. So what actually brought me to become a literary agent was my prior experience as a publisher. I actually also on the side, beside being an agent, I'm also a publisher. I run a small publishing house which is dedicated to Asian literature in French translation. And I've been running that publishing venture for the past 6 years or so. And I thought that it was important at the time to give a space to literary translators so that they could actually introduce more authors and more stories from Asian countries or Asian regions, which French readers don't really have access to and rarely have the opportunity to read anything from. So this being a publisher kind of like logically brought me to become an agent, because I saw as a publisher that it was also quite hard to convince other publishers to publish Asian authors in particular. And I wanted to actually become a literary agent to understand the globality of the business, and also to be able to push some of the names that I had been working with a bit further and try to get them published not only in France but also in other languages and other foreign countries.
Thank you. Kelly, would you like to continue? Kelly, are you there?
I'm here. Okay, sorry, I had my mic muted. Yes, so I founded the Asia Literary Agency in 2013 to represent Asian authors and experts on Asia and writers living in Australia, Asia region, be they experts or not. So I was in Hong Kong when I founded the agency. I was living there. Before that, I was an editor. It was that really turned my head. I mean, I have a background as a Korean linguist as well, but being in Asia, especially during the height of the recession in the UK, I really felt that I really saw how Asia was just booming, and I was very interested in, you know, the talent pool in Asia of authors that we had never heard of in the West, and the emerging talent. Especially, but also, you know, some of the more established names beyond, you know, the Murakamis that everyone's heard of, but in the West. But, you know, we had some great, you know, names in the East that in the West people weren't aware of. And I just felt there was a real gap in the market, and, you know, really wanted to show the world how the East was rising and the rich, you know, diversity of the cultures, you know, across Asia, and the nuances of the Asian region beyond what people's stereotypes, you know, might have been. And Jerome, like you say, you know, it's a little bit difficult to convince. It's easier now. I think people like you and I and Jayapriya, we've kind of made some headway convincing people that, you know, to look our way, to look east. And but at first it was very difficult, you know, it was very difficult, but it's become easier to ask publishers in the West to look beyond their borders. I mean, sometimes I would get the reaction, people saying, oh, well, I already have a Japanese author on my list, I don't need another one, that kind of thing. So we're just trying to open their minds to, you know, even greater diversity.
Okay, yeah, well, that sounds great. And yeah, I'll ask you a bit later how successful you are with all of that, and whether something has really changed. Yeah, we really hope so. All right, thank you. Jaya, would you like to continue?
I come from a family of writers. My father and grandfather were writers. I worked in small press in India, and then I ran a bookstore. And I wanted to, you know, this is just before my daughter was born. I wanted to do something different. And I set up India's first literary agency 23 years ago this month. And when I set it up, this was pre-internet, really. So I had no idea what an agent did. And I took on 9 writers, worked with them, and sold their work only in India. I worked just in India for 5 years to understand the business and the market and really figure it out. And I signed up to work with Paul Marsh at the Marsh Agency, who was my great mentor and, you know, such a dazzling man, really. And at that point, just after I signed that contract, we moved to China. And that started like a whole new way of looking at my work and my life. I lived in Beijing, Singapore, and then Nairobi. And I collected authors as I went along, culturally from the cities I lived in, and also from people I met and connections. Our business is so much about not just the beauty of language, but also about the connections and relationships we make. So 7 years ago, Helen works out of London now. So the two of us manage about like 70 writers, focusing very much on Asia, but driven completely by books we love and writers like. I'm so sort of pleased that I have one of mine over here on this panel. Lakshmi, hello, special hello.
Hello. No, it's so, I'm trying to relive this moment because the last time we were in a panel together was at the Frankfurt Book Fair, and that was
exactly.
Time does fly.
Yeah. So I can't imagine it exactly. So that's really been my story. That take on books that you like. We spend a lot of time working on books. It's really important to understand cultural context. And recently, I've been trying to sell an Indonesian book, in fact, to America, and I actually found a perfect publisher, wrote to her on Instagram, and sold the book there. I wouldn't have the courage to have done that in a pre-pandemic world. Let me tell you that. So yes, that's really all it is, to take books that you like and take it to places that you think it can go, not an easy task. I'm sure my fellow agents would agree that it's really stressful to sell to people who don't understand what you're talking about. Like the first book I sold in the UK myself, it was a book about a woman finding her strength as a mother, not as a mother, as a wife, but the cover had hennaed hands. And I was so distressed. I said, but this has nothing to do with marriage. This book is about her journey as a woman. So things like that we constantly have to battle and, make people understand what the book really is. And I think finally,
Jaya, on the original English version of my latest novel, For Baby, it was actually commissioned by my German publisher and then published in German first in September 2018. And at the time I was, and actually still am, represented by Kirby Kim at Jean-Claude Nesbitt in New York. And he became my agent in 2014, I think. And he still represents two of my earlier novels that he has successfully sold. So it's the English rights to my first novel, Amba, or The Question of Red, and then also the global rights to my second novel, Aruna dan Lidahnya and the Bird Woman's Palette. Now, bear with me because this is a little complicated, but to Kirby's credit, he allowed me to work with another agent on For Baby and waived his own right to the book. So that was where Jay came in. Kirby at the time felt For Baby might not be the easiest novel to market in the US, given how simultaneously narrow and unpredictable the US market can be, or the US readership can be. Plus the fact that the novel doesn't have the most automatically kind of marketable of premises. It's about the struggle of a willfully difficult international visual artist, nation roots and a dark past, etc., etc. Yet I needed someone who believed in, who might even love the work, and understood where the story came from. So when I met Jay, she gave the manuscript a close read and understood immediately why I needed to tell this story the way I did. So she discussed the storyline with me in great depth. She suggested constructive edits and allowed me the time necessary to finesse the novel before submitting it to publishers. And within 2 weeks of my giving her the final manuscript in December, I think, of 2018, she landed me a deal with Penguin Random House Southeast Asia. And Penguin had just established themselves in Singapore at the time and was the new kid on the block and was as yet untested. But there was no denying the power of having that, the seal of the penguin seal on the cover of your book. It felt like, the highest accomplishment and the highest endorsement of quality as well. So I bask in it. Was very thankful to Jay to have gotten me there. And the fact that she knows the Southeast Asian literary scene and where I stand in it, of course, is a big plus. But more than anything, I think it was her commitment to the book, the feeling of security I have knowing that she personally likes the book and my writing, and that she gets me, and that I find most important.
Okay, and you have, you're represented by two agents. One is a big agency, a very big international agency in New York, and you're
it's
working with Jay. Exactly.
Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So what's the difference in how they work for you?
Well, there is a difference, of course, working on the one hand with a big, glamorous international firm, as you've described it, like Jean-Claude Nesbitt, and a smaller regional firm like Jacaranda. But it's like essentially in any other field, it's on the most superficial level. It's about status / glamour / prestige / power versus what I think is specialized knowledge of specific regions. Both have their advantages, to say the least, but it's only been recently that I realized that certain works may demand certain agents, and this is why having two in my corner is very reassuring. So when I signed up with Jean-Claude Nesbitt in 2014, I was, a little starstruck because it was like a dream come true. I mean, they represent literary royalty, like showbiz celebrities and former heads of state, and being on the same list as them was mind-blowing. But also because for years, I had been laboring under the assumption that getting a US or a UK-based agent was the ultimate ticket to international success. And there was no denying that the power and the pull of firms like JNN have in the UK or in the US markets. It's enormous, right? and it's something you cannot do yourself because these markets don't know you and you don't know them. But in my experience, the all that glam, that visibility of being represented by a big firm often blinds you to the fact that while you may be at the center of the world, you're only one very small client in a sea of giants. So over time, I felt this more acutely. It's my own invisibility, and not just because I'm a small fry compared to the others, but also because the novel Fall Baby, its complexities and its particularities are probably too foreign, too heavily contextualized for the average American reader who may not know Indonesia at all, let alone its diversity. And you need a strategy, for Indonesian literature to travel, precisely because contemporary Indonesian literature is not to your culture, your world. They know the regional scene, they know the people, they know the local scene, they know who you are. And the challenge, as Jay just explained just now, is of course how to get the world to listen. But that, I think, is the main difference between them.
Okay, thank you.
Spend a second saying that Lakshmi's book won an award for the best book award from the Singapore publisher last month.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Congratulations once again.
We had a watch party when she was in a taxi.
Yes.
When she was in the taxi.
Outside,
And I think I even told her. Remember? Luckily, yeah, I did. Yeah, really
I had mixed up the time, the time difference. I remember. Yes, so that was an unexpected but very special moment.
Yeah, great. Jerome, I want to ask you, how does...
I happen to be very interested in actually working with authors who do not write in English, but who write in languages that are local Asian languages, like Indonesian, like Thai, like Chinese, Japanese, etc. And I'm especially interested in authors who actually write in their national languages. And so I cannot myself read most of these languages. I do read a bit of Chinese, a bit of Indonesian, but it takes me ages to understand a whole novel. So I depend a lot on translators, and literary translators are usually my first port of call, my first contact in understanding a work, understanding an author, what they're all about, what they write about. And I have actually kind of like built a large network of literary translators who are able to read and translate from a variety of Asian languages through my work as a publisher. And so as a publisher, I got to read quite a large number of especially short stories, poetry, excerpts of novels, and some of them really caught my attention. And depending on whether I feel like they could travel further, whether the topic is especially relevant at this particular time, whether I feel like the style or the author is especially engaging and gripping, and then I would engage the translator immediately and try to get to know more about the particular author. If the author is also can speak English, then I engage a conversation with the author to try to know more about him or her, and that's usually how it starts. That's the very beginning of it. And if I feel like there is potential there, then I would try to convince the author to work with me. Now, where it ends is there's of course a long process when we start working on the pitch, trying to, and then submitting the work to as many editors as possible, and trying to get the book published in other languages. And it doesn't necessarily end, but I mean obviously the best result we can get is to get that book published in another language and in as many languages as possible. So when the contract is signed, is usually the best end we can hope for, and that makes both the author, myself, happy, and why not even the literary translator, if he or she happens to be the particular translator that recommended the author in the first place. That's the perfect story.
Yeah. Hopefully that perfect story happens often. Kelly,
it does.
It does. Kelly, I told you.
Agency, I had to go out and look for them. You know, it was I'll call it my couple of years of, 1- and 2-star hotels. It was pretty grim. And a lot of, staying in little grotty places like that, because I had so little money, because, as an agent, we work on commission. So I don't make none of us make any money until we make a sale. And from that sale, we get the commission money. And it doesn't always come through as all at once. So you have the advance, which is split into, on signature, on delivery, on publication of the hardback, on publication of the paperback. And then please God, if the advance earns out, or then you start getting royalties. So it takes a kind of head of steam for an agency, a new agency, to build up the revenue that gives us some cash in our pocket to invest back into the agency without dipping into our own pockets, our own personal pockets. So because I have, this background in London as an editor, I had, very strong contacts there in literary, also in New York. I would never have started the agency if I didn't know that I had, very strong ties, and that people didn't also, trust my taste. I worked very hard to establish my reputation in the industry. And to keep my name well known. And, the more established you become as an agent and as an editor, and the more successes you have, the easier, the more easily doors will open for you. Because as agents, we are basically a kind of filter for publishers, as let's say a literary scout is. So, the publishers often will look to us, will ask us for books, what's going on in Asia, who's hot, what's topical now, or they will come to us and say, we're looking for X, Y, and Z. And sometimes, I go out and then look for that book or that author to, suit their taste, not often, but occasionally. So that's one way that it's become easier. Also, the reputation of the agency is established enough now that people come to me. I don't have to really search for them anymore, apart from, as I said, when a publisher, asks for something specific. So yeah, that in that way it's become a bit easier. And we represent fiction and non-fiction, so I have the joy of, and I'm, as a former editor, I'm very involved with my authors' manuscripts before they go out into the world on submission, and sometimes even after they've been commissioned. So yeah, to go back to what Lakshmi is saying, all three of us on this panel are, boutique agencies, and it's, my heart and soul into this agency, as I think it is for Jerome and Jay. And, I can never take on a book or an author unless I, really fall head over heels in love with it. And I do think it's hugely important for me to continue to go out to Asia and, understand what's going on the ground, to hear about new talent, and, feel the pulse of a place. It's palpable when you're out there. You feel the energy of Asia. And I kind of feel that I act as a conduit to convey that energy to publishers, and the energy of my authors, and so yeah.
And has it become easier? I mean, yeah, I know you said the publishers, are they more?
Yeah, it's subtle, and more agents are wanting to get a piece of the pie in Asia as well. So you see, more people coming out. True. And yeah, which is fine. I always say that there are enough authors in Asia for all of us. And, so much, especially of fiction publishing, is about taste. What's my taste is different to Jayapriya's taste or Jerome's taste. And, the books that I love, we established a little tribe of other editors who love the books that we love, and the readership of, you know, those people who love the books that I love. And they're going to be different to or complementary to the readers who enjoy the books that Jerome loves and Jayapriya loves.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it's just a community. You can't say, you know, Lakshmi is an Indonesian writer. I mean, you know, that's not what you write. Lakshmi is not, you know, Indonesia. There's thousands of other Indonesian writers,
That's
right?
right.
Who,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
So
Yes.
the more the merrier.
Okay, well, it's good to hear that all of that there are more agents. I mean, it's good to hear in the sense of that there's more acceptance for literary titles and non-fiction titles from Asia in the West, because in Germany that's still very difficult. It's not easy to get publishers to do that. I mean, some of are interested per se, but it's still quite a lot of work. Jaya, are you selling to also to publishers in non-English speaking countries, right?
We work with co-agents. We don't work directly in non-English speaking countries directly at all. No. Okay. So we do have co-agents in several countries in Europe, and we work through them. But we had a preempt in France a few years ago of, it's a strange story. So like Jerome, I'm very obsessed with translated literature. It's my thing. Translation by an American, considered to be China's first gay novel. And that book was preempted in France like one day after we'd all gone back home from the book fair. So my co-agent wrote to me and she said, we have a deal. It's a good deal. It was a really good deal. So, you know, we work with partner agents. We really were happy staying with the English language market. In India, I do sell in Indian languages, but not, you know, only 5 or 6 languages will really work in India. So yes, mostly either reading English language, you know, work written in the English language or translated, at least for a sample by a trusted translator. Again, you know, following very much from what Jerome is saying, similar. You know, you have your trusted people. Like for this Chinese novel, I had somebody write me reams of background information before I took it on. But I sold it very quickly once I had that material. But I stay very much working in English language and working with partners for the rest of the world.
Okay. Jerome, I wanted to ask you, a lot of publishers from the West have scouts in America or in the UK or even in France to look for work.
Or actually production companies such as Netflix, etc. And actually this past few months has been quite active for us in terms of selling film rights. We happen to have quite a few titles that have been doing very well in the French market, and that are now finding their way onto the screen. So scouts are definitely one of our most regular, the people we talk to quite regularly, and they are essential pieces of the puzzle, people that you can definitely get in touch with and try to convince them that this book is especially good for their particular client, that it can travel to that particular country and work with that particular publisher, and they're usually very receptive to what agents have to say, and we enjoy a very good collaboration relationships with all of them, and this past few months, yes, they've been very eager to discuss with agents like us. We felt that there was a really need, a really strong need to bind again over online meetings. Impossible to meet physically anymore. So yeah, the scouts are for us are essential.
And these are scouts that are scouting for foreign publishers?
For publishers, yeah, that's right. So scouts are usually would work for a number of foreign publishers in several countries. Some a publisher might be in Germany, another one might be in the UK, another one might be in China, another one might be in Japan, and usually scouts would actually represent publishers that tend to have a certain homogeneous kind of taste, so that they are able to actually recommend, not for just one particular client, but for their whole list of clients. And so we focus, of course, on scouts that work for literary publishers in fiction and nonfiction, and some of them, have been very, very receptive lately. And some scouts are smaller, but you can't neglect those smaller scouts as well. Maybe they just work for one or two clients, say in France or in Italy, but they're also very proactive. So we work with all of them.
Okay, so it's quite a long chain, right? The author, the agent, the scout, the publisher.
That's right. Yes, the scouts are definitely part of the puzzle, and so we have our meetings with editors who work for a particular special. I mean, any publishing house out there, but we also work with scouts. We work with translators. This is a long chain of people and everybody has to feel like they're involved. Yeah.
Interesting. Kelly, what would you say are your biggest challenges?
It's not really, my work is not really a challenge to me. It's just fun. And I think the challenge is to manage the author's expectations, right? I mean, everybody, it's to explain to the authors, especially the, debut authors, the kind of vagaries of the publishing industry. And, sometimes I often work with journalists, and, they're used to that, news cycle so fast. And if they have a proposal that we go out with, they want it to be sold immediately, and they want it published the same year, and everything, they want it to happen very quickly. But, in publishing, it's a very slow moving machine, unless there's something, hugely topical that has to, come out, immediately. But it's that managing the author's expectations on, when the book will be published, and reassuring them that if it is published in 2 years' time after signature, that it will still be, relevant, that they are writing a timeless book that will, backlist, that if explaining to them that sometimes a smaller publisher is more valuable than, a Penguin Random House, for example, or explaining that, why an advance is what it is in the market, and that not everybody is getting £100,000 advances. Those are the only ones you hear about, but there are a whole lot of others that are, not so much, but can translate into, big successes. Sometimes these smaller publishers are the ones who take the risks and only have, $1,000 or so to spend on a manuscript. But then the manuscript will go on to win, big prizes and make heaps of money and get a lot of attention on the back of a rather small advance. But it's because, you've got a boutique publisher who are putting their life and soul into making the book a success. They believe in it so much that they have so much invested in it. They're kind of sometimes live or die on, each book they publish. So, I think it's managing authors' expectations is a challenge.
Thank you. Lakshmi, the author, what are your expectations? Also be interested to understand how you work with Indonesian publishers, because even though some of your work is written in English first and published in Germany first, but what out of that version, and how does that work?
Well, I'm very blessed to have a fantastic, very loyal, very supportive Indonesian publisher, Gramedia Pustaka Utama. It was at their urging, in fact, in 2011, that I abandoned my earlier drafts of my first novel, Amba, which was written in English. about Indonesia that could be appreciated overseas. But I encountered so many problems with that I felt that it was lacking something, and that was the seal of approval of the Indonesian audience, first and foremost. So Gramedia encouraged me to do that, and since then, the path of the novel had become way more complicated. But then I got the German deal, and that was I owed that deal to media. My Indonesian publisher, but he turned agent, and he took it upon himself to bring my somewhat, hastily done English self-translation to Ullstein, my German publisher, at the 2013 Frankfurt Book Fair. He was not my agent, even though he was at the time setting up his own literary agency, as I remember it. And he was very gracious when I told him 6 months later, in 2014, that Jean-Claude Nesbitt had offered to represent me, and that I was inclined to take up the offer. He knew I had been looking for a UK or a US-based agent for a long time. You see, but translation rights is something that I find, or in my experience, that translation is where an author doesn't always see eye to eye with his or her agent. Because in my career, I've made friends with many international translators who each have their own publishers and who offered to translate my work, and who I knew are the best translators for my work. And it's very important for an author to know this, in as much of he or she can influence the process, right? Because if there are two things that are important to an author, it is that their book gets widely published and translated as well as possible. Now, as we all know, there are not many good Indonesian translators out there, and there are not many Indonesian translators, period. So finding one interested in translating your work is wonderful. But your agent may think differently. Either the size of the advance is not right, the price is not right, or the conditions are not right, the publisher is not right. The publisher the agent prefers might appoint another translator. So there are many permutations to this situation. These are the things that the agent may know better about, might not be what you want, right? And because you're bound to your agent, you cannot make decisions on your own. My Indonesian publisher has waived the right to all that, because as soon as I got Jean-Claude Nesbitt, they relinquished all their right to them. But I did often wonder if it would have been better to deal directly with publishers, not just in terms of the money you don't have to share with your agent, but also in your personal choices, right, of collaborators, if you have any. So when I was first approached by Jean-Claude Nesbitt, I had sold the German right to my first novel, right, to Ullstein. And other than the German deal, I already sealed 6 months earlier. I was already also in conversation with the Dutch publisher Sander Uitgevers that wanted to buy my Dutch rights. So Jean-Claude Nesbitt stepped in and assigned his foreign rights director to seal the Dutch deal for me. And then we had a nice signing ceremony and so on at JNN office in New York. And the following year, they got me a 2-book with Amazon crossing in the US for both the English version of my second novel and my English translation of my first novel. And with all of my publishers, I struck a friendship, working relationship with Amazon, with my editor, Gabriella in particular. And for the first time, I experienced what it was like working as a professional publisher every step of the way. But since then, Jean-Claude Nesbitt underwent some restructuring, which affected the foreign rights segment of it, because the old foreign rights director left, and she was replaced by someone whom I never got to know, who might not be familiar with my book. So communication was often slow. And I must say, I was feeling quite lonely when I was working on Fall Baby, because it was commissioned, as I said earlier, by Ullstein on the strengths of the success of the German translation of my first novel. And I felt a little divorced from Jean-Claude Nesbitt at the time, because I had not even been introduced to my new foreign rights director or representative. And even though Ullstein approached me directly about the idea, the deal still had to go through or handled by JNN, right? Because they are my agent. And this changed once Jacaranda took over and representing the world English rights to For Baby. So I'm not saying which agency would better represent the novel, but as I mentioned earlier, given the complex history of this novel, being a novel about Indonesia, written in English, published first in German, and only after that in its original language, and after that in Indonesian, it might be the sort of novel that would be best represented by someone who knows a bit about the culture and the scene. And so this is where we go back to Jay.
We have a question from the audience here, and as content creators, to introduce our own books if the publishers are not introducing. Is it ethical for a content creator, let's say author and illustrator, to introduce their own works? And I think the question is meant for all of you, obviously. Yeah. What do you say? Let's start with Jerome.
Well, the question is whether a content creator can actually introduce their own work to a publisher. Is that it?
I think so, yeah. It's not specifically outlined here, but yeah. I think that's
so. To go through an agent first, so as to be able to get your work all the way to a publisher. Some countries it's not as specific. If you were to, for example, look for a smaller publisher in France, they wouldn't necessarily require you to be agented at all, and they would very much gladly consider your submission and maybe even publish it. But I would think that the best way to really be able to bring your work around and to as countries as possible is to submit it to an agent. So for that, you would have to do a little market study, try to find who's who does what kind of agencies are available for your kind of work, and try to of course work on a submission, try to learn how to pitch your work, give a sample, write a synopsis, write a cover letter to introduce yourself. So those are all small steps that you need to actually do before actually submitting your work to an agent, and to the agent that you decided is the right one for you.
Would anyone like to add something to this question? Kelly, maybe?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, Jaya, silakan. Yeah, please.
In a country like India, we don't have a culture of, needing an agent to represent a writer. So a lot of submissions are direct, but I think that very often in this part of the world, writers appoint an agent, make you work on their pitch, terminate the contract, just to think that, it's better to earn a little more money and go directly. But I think it comes back to needing an agent because we have the relationships and editors trust us. So even if we're living in a part of the
I mean, I think the work that publishers do with the right agent for the work that they're submitting, that publishers in UK and USA won't touch a book necessarily unless it's represented by an agent. I know that's not the case necessarily in France, as you say, or in India, as you say, Jaya. But in terms of the question, I didn't quite understand, it's a bit vague, but in terms of content creation, I think that's important after the book is published, to help promote it. And also, if it's, it does help to sell the book to a publisher, to show the publisher that you will have content that will help them promote it when it's published. I mean, the more the author can do to promote his or her own work, the better.
Yeah.
Jay, are you back?
Am I? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm saying that in a country where there isn't a culture of agents, there isn't in the books that we bring them, that we won't bring them incomplete work or work that is irrelevant to their list. So we know who reads what. So in a publishing house, there are 8 editors. I'm not going to take myth and fantasy to an editor who buys literary fiction. But if there isn't a culture of having agents, I think it's fine for any content creators to go directly. It's really the choice of the writer.
Mm.
Could I just add, I mean, one thing that we do as agents is look over the contracts very carefully. I mean, some agents look over them more carefully than others. I have seen that. One way an agent can add value, to you, to the authors. I've seen some desperately sad contracts, some of them from very major publishers, take so many rights away. They're unevenly balanced in favor of the publisher, and because authors are so keen and eager to, especially debut authors, to, have their books published, just like, oh, I'll sign away my firstborn child, please just publish my book. When in fact, we agents are there to protect the rights of our authors. And, some of our, I guess that's one of my biggest challenges is the contract negotiations that can go on. I had one contract negotiation that went on for a year with a real strong-arm publisher trying to really, nitpick away at, any rights, any gains we were trying to make for our debut author. And we finally, reached an agreement, but it was a very difficult process. And I don't think any author, unless they were a lawyer themselves, would have the same ability as a good agent to negotiate a good deal.
But let's say if the author would say, I really want to be published, and I don't care if these conditions are not what you expect, but
The author is the one who signs the contract ultimately. What happens is that, we accept an offer subject to contract. And then, we, the agent, go back and forth with the publisher, and all the while keeping the author. We go back and forth with the publisher, all the while keeping the author in the loop. So, there are times when what we want as agents for our authors cannot be achieved, and we have to explain, this is as far as we could get. We might have to sacrifice X to get Y. I haven't had the case where an author has said, I'll take it, doesn't matter, because they trust that I'm working in their best interest. So, I'm not doing anything as an agent that isn't in my author's best interest, and they understand that. I'm really their advocate, but also we as agents, I'm sure Jerome and Jaya, you'll agree, and Lakshmi as well, that we also, we are the kind of mediator sometimes between the publisher and the author. Sometimes there's conflict. And so we try to explain both sides of the story to both the editor and the author, right? That's one of the ways, a couple of the ways that we add value.
Okay, I have one more question here, and that's how is the corona, the crisis, how is the crisis affecting your business, and how is the turn towards digital means affecting the business and your work?
Well, I would just say that, yeah, we've been having tons and tons of online meetings for the past 2 months or so, and we're gonna actually extend the period of online meetings until whenever it gets better again. It kind of suits us in a way, because it allows us to not to rush so much, and to actually plan our meetings carefully, and to even have longer meetings than what we normally would have, say, in Frankfurt or in London. And even though we lose, of course, the adrenaline rush that makes Frankfurt and those book fairs so special as well. Yeah, a lot of online meetings. And in terms of sales, I thought that especially when we first all went into lockdown in spring, there was a really strong desire from editors and publishers to read and acquire new works. We felt a really strong surge in editors actually wanting to read this, wanting to acquire that. For our agency, especially, it was kind of like a very good time. And as I was saying earlier, so in terms of film rights, we actually signed quite a few deals. It may have to do, of course, with our list this year, which is it's especially good. But this past few months haven't been that bad for us. Actually, I must say that we've actually managed to go through all this quite well.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. If you could also, Jai and Lakshmi and Kelly could just answer.
Had a lot of sales during the pandemic, surprisingly. To answer the digital question, I think I think they're referring to how people are reading more digitally. Like I'm reading a lot on Libby on the library app. So I think a lot of the world is reading digitally. There's been a huge surge in Asia, which doesn't have a culture of reading ebooks or even audio has grown. But otherwise, during the pandemic, we found our writers have been their creative best, and it's been really good. And I think that now this is the new normal, and everybody is going to soldier on like this.
Yeah, Kelly.
Sorry, yes. I think for me it's been mixed, but then their headspace was a bit weird, and they were unsure about what they were going to be publishing into the future. So I have 5 amazing books coming out next year, and I'm very happy with, and I'm basically looking towards the future and the great year ahead that we're going to have, and have spent a lot of time during the pandemic working on manuscripts that we're going to submit in January. So
thank you. Thank you. Last word from Lakshmi, the author.
Well, I think what the pandemic, if anything, if it has one blessing, that would be that it has taught us to take time, to not rush, right, and to rethink what we want to write and how we are to interact with our readers and how we're to collaborate with our publishers and our agents. And I think I have never seen a coming together of those elements at one time, sharing a common challenge and wanting to rise together. But I do agree with Kelly's earlier point that it's important to cultivate yourself, also to build your own public persona, get people to like you and believe in you as opposed to just your work only. Because at the end of the day, whoever your agent is, even if you are ultimately working with that person, you are your best promoter. But having said that, because I get to have the last word, it's still best to have an agent if you want to be published internationally, because nothing beats the feeling of having someone who has your back.
Thank you. That was a great last word.
Yeah.
Dengan informasi terkini, menjadi sumber referensi dan inspirasi di setiap aktivitas. Melalui news video portal, segala informasi dapat disajikan cepat, akurat dan lengkap. Dengan kekuatan teknologi digital, Maidcom.id hadir dengan berita pilihan yang dikemas secara menarik. Maidcom.id, digitally inspire people.
Sudah 15 menit, masih kejebak macet.
Tenang. Daripada emosi, 15 menit Anda jadi lebih berharga kalau bersama saya.
15 Minutes, setiap Rabu, jam 6 sore lewat 45 menit. Mediaindonesia.com hadir dengan opini cerdas dan narasumber kredibel, mudah diakses, informasi berkualitas ada di genggaman Anda. Klik di browser Anda www.mediaindonesia.com dan temukan pandangan berbeda, karena fakta bisa sama, sudut pandang boleh beda. Mediaindonesia.com, Views and News.
Dalam setiap denyut kota, saya selalu menjadi saksinya.
Disiarkan lebih dari 20 televisi jaringan Jawpos Group. Jawpos TV paling Indonesia.
Kebebasan pers dan gelombang era digital menghadirkan ribuan bahkan jutaan informasi dan data setiap harinya. Beragam data dan informasi berserak di berbagai tempat seiring dengan perubahan dunia yang bergerak begitu cepat. Media-media baru pun bermunculan, namun kualitas informasi seolah tak lagi menjadi prioritas. Bahkan tak sedikit yang abai pada etika jurnalisme. Untuk menjawab tantangan itu, Kata Data hadir sejak April 2012 sebagai portal media di bidang ekonomi dan bisnis. Beragam sektor diulas mulai dari finansial, energi, pangan, hingga industri kreatif dan digital. Artikel mendalam dan komprehensif dengan sajian infografik yang menarik menjadi karakter utama dari Kata Data. Kata Data berikhtiar untuk terus menyajikan beragam informasi berkualitas untuk kemajuan negeri dan untuk kepentingan bisnis Anda. Kami percaya demokrasi yang sehat tumbuh dari kehadiran informasi dan data yang akurat.
Kalau bicara pakai data.
Hidup terlalu pendek untuk membiarkan pemikiran-pemikiranmu, ide-idemu terdiam begitu saja. Untuk berubah, kita perlu melangkah. Dan langkah itu lahir dari sebuah inspirasi. Republika, start moving.